composing the mind-body, the background resonance of the sound of silence, like a focus of just getting in touch, recognizing that has this expansiveness and unlimitedness, but it's also one-pointed, so that it's like a paradox. Because like with any kind of technique of meditation, we tend to, we pick up ideas or instructions from others, and we tend to feel we have to do this and then do that. So it's the mind itself is easily conditioned and programmed by the ideas we have, the opinions, views that we form about practice, or what we think the scriptures say, or the teacher says, or the meditation master says. So people ask, what should I do when I first start meditating? Should I go to the breath or body, or the doubts arise? What should I do? How long should I do anapanasati, or body sweeping, or whatever? How many hours should I sit practicing sitting meditation, or how long should I take to do the walking meditation? So part of us wants information and instruction and definition for practice. Just to recognize that there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not criticizing that, but just pointing it out, that the conditioned mind is very much one that forms through ideas and programs, schedules, conventions, wanting certainty. How long should I sit? Should I practice mindfulness of the breath first, or do samatha first and then vipassana? So pointing this out is that's the way we pick up even the sublime teachings of the Buddha, or the wise instructions of a meditation teacher. And so this sense of intuitive awareness, the way I experience that is through this broader spectrum, this background of awareness, rather than, which brings up any kind of compulsive tendencies I might have or have acquired through meditation, or doubts about practice or myself or whatever. Anything that the conditioned mind forms or creates in the present. So it has perspective on that. It is not kind of judging it, as I shouldn't have any views or opinions, but it's putting them in the context. See them as conditions rather than as the kind of starting point of practice. At first, maybe, when people don't, usually beginners don't have enough awareness, or not, need more definition, to something to hold on to for a while, to start with or to begin with. So meditation techniques are valuable in that way. But then But then the point is the developing this awareness of the here and now, the way it is. So, just explaining what happens to me in this practice is with this sound of silence as a background. Then I feel, I've developed this to the point where it's very simple, very easy, very natural. It's not. I don't have to apply any effort, like try to find it because it's with me, and just remember a matter of recognizing and being with it, or remembering it. So, like just the word silent immediately, and even when I hear the word silence or silent, the sound of silence kind of immediately, it's just there. I might be caught in some kind of emotional state or mental proliferation, but then just hearing the word silence, this sound of silence, I recognize immediately. And this is like a way of training, or Bhutto, the mantra Bhutto. Then from that spectrum of oneness, then things come up in the conscious. I'm aware of maybe the breath will arise. I notice the breath or the body. One can notice what is really happening. Like what kind of state of mind am I feeling? Restless or anxious about anything, or dull or tired, whatever. The mental state might be the dominant experience of this moment. The kind of unresolved emotional mood of this moment, or the breath, or then the body might be asking for attention. So that you feel this maybe tensions or stresses in the body. And the body is, gets habituated through our lives. We, through the traumas and stresses and tensions that we experience through, from childhood up to the present, they have their effect on the body, the way we hold ourselves, the habits we've formed. They're like traumas, emotional traumas, or shocks that we have in just being part of this realm, the human realm on this planet. If when you notice what happens when you're shocked, when you feel this sudden sense of something happens and it shocks you, this is what I've noticed. And I don't feel anything. It's just like everything kind of stops for that moment. And of course that has its effect on the body also. And this is where mindfulness is a way to deal with it, because as we trust in the awareness, then the kind of physical habits that we've developed through our lives become more conscious. And when we allow them to be conscious, then we can not reinforce habits or release kind of blockages, energetic blockages or shocks. We can carry trauma and shock, even quite unconscious, just through the bodily way the body gets kind of stuck in a certain way through those kind of experiences. And they needn't be anything all that dramatic, like some shocks are quite through great kind of experience, very heavy experiences, but also there's a number of things in life that just tend to upset or shock us, and the stiff upper lip attitude that is common here has a kind of noble quality to it. And let's get on with it. Let's not wallow in this and get on with life is a kind of attitude that is certainly, in many ways quite a noble one. But in that process, sometimes we don't really resolve things in our lives very well, and we just learn how to kind of grin and bear it, stiff upper lip, and get on with our lives. Where with meditation, bhavana, we're actually using our conscious experience for resolution of conditioned experience, letting the experiences that impinge on us, into full consciousness, and without, just get on with life and ignoring the effect, but allowing the effect to be conscious till it naturally resolves itself. It's not me trying to resolve my problems, or that in terms of a self-view that I've got to come to grips with my traumas and imperfections, because that tends to keep the illusion of a kind of permanent self, keeps it going. We tend to operate from that as our modus operandi. So instead of operating from that illusion, we're letting that illusion become conscious. And I've noticed that like bodily awareness, as we bring attention more to allowing the body to speak for itself, bring it into consciousness, then the body actually has its own way of resolving things. It's not through my ego kind of forcing its will on the body, making it just ignoring its signals or denying its reality, but allowing this physical formation to be what it is. And it, of course, is a condition in nature. So it has, has a natural intelligence that knows how to deal with the slings and arrows of our fortune, if we allow it to. Stiff upper lip attitudes can be just very mental, so we just, we deny our body its right to be conscious by just suppressing or distracting ourselves from from the way it is, the way the body feels at this moment. If you really do a lot of awareness of physical sensation, of bodily awareness of the body, it's the kind of magic of it all is that one can bring into consciousness just a point on the body, the tip of the nose or the top of the head or the little toe on your right foot, or from the kind of one little bit to the full body experience. So in the posture of sitting, what is the full body experience? And just that perception of full body, total body experience is not a kind of, we're not trying to find the body as some kind of experience in the present, but opening consciousness to allow this body in this posture to be what it is. It's like embracing the physical formation, the whole physical formation. remember when I started doing the kind of sensation sweeping practice in the body, it always kind of amazed me in a way how I could just think, one part of my body, like forefinger on the right hand, and then it's conscious just by bringing even the word, the concept into consciousness. Then it seems that the actual that part becomes conscious. Oh, that's quite magical in a way. Because before that, I didn't get the connection. The intellect seemed quite separate from the actual physical and sensational realities of this body. So, like the oneness, the infinity of awareness, unlimitedness, as a concept, then when you try to define it, of course, you're trying to define the undefinable or limit the unlimited. So this is like with intuition. It's an intuitive intelligence we're depending on or we're using rather than a defining one, an intellectual one. So on the intellectual level, we might feel very baffled by all this. By some people find the kind of, when I talk about intuition or reflection or the way I do, they feel just baffled by it because they can't quite, figure it out. And because there's so much kind of wanting definition through naming, through conceiving, through defining experience. Or just a reflection of the way it is. What way is it then? It's the way it is. But it has to be some way, so the intellect can actually, be trying to figure out what it actually means. When I say the way it is, what does that really mean? And of course, what can I say? This is where words fail, and we have to depend on the mindfulness, sati sampajanya, which doesn't define. It isn't finding anything and then defining it and objectifying it as a part, but the awareness, sati sampajanya, allows us to be one with the totality. So oneness, the reality of oneness, where oneness includes everything. So how can you define everything? Through the intellect. But if you cultivate this awareness, then the conditioned realm is included in that, and then it can speak for itself. It is what it is, so the mood you're in, is received in consciousness rather than judged according to a value system we might have of good and bad, right and wrong. So like the Luang Por Chah once, when I went to see Buddhadasa years ago, and he asked me what I practiced. This is before he really knew much about Ajahn Chah. Well, and I wasn't very good at explaining, so I said, we keep strict Vinaya, very strong on the Vinaya, and we practice Bhutana sati, Puto. So then Buddhadasa says, well, if you're mindful, you don't need the Vinaya. That's and so I thought, that's interesting, because when Vinaya is given such importance, then from the monastic training, it tends to be condition sine qua non for our lives. To be strict and pure in the Vinaya. It seems one doesn't even question that. One just assumes that. At least I did. So then Buddhadasa said this statement, which rather shocked me, because I had very, very fully committed to keeping the Vinaya in a very strict way. So when I went back to Wat Pah Pong, I told Ajahn Chah what Buddhadasa said, and Ajahn Chah's response was, true but not right, right but not true. It was very interesting. He didn't deny it, say Buddhadasa was wrong. But that reflection, true but not right, right but not true, is a kind of koan, isn't it? Or a paradox. I mean, it's an enigma, a conundrum. The intellect wants to say if it's right, then rightness is truth, or the truth is right. We have this way the intellect works, isn't it? We have this dualistic function that tends to divide and define and specify and discriminate. And so good is, from this level, is opposed to bad, and right and true are almost synonymous. So how could something be right but not true, or true but not right? And of course this, trying to figure it out is, on that level of thinking, was impossible. But then because Ajahn Chah's emphasis was so much on the awareness and reflection, the vipassana practices, sati sampajanya, then I began to see this how I could, the dilemma I created through trying to figure out this enigmatic statement. Because I was expecting Ajahn Chah to say, Buddhadasa is wrong and I'm right. And I was kind of interpreting Buddhadasa as saying, you don't have to bother with the Vinaya, just be mindful, which he wasn't, he wasn't saying that. But that's how my logical mind tended to receive it and interpret what he said. Now, in the awareness, then, right and wrong can coexist at the same moment. True and false, or any enigma or koan or puzzle, conundrum can, any kind of formation whatsoever, any kind of intellectual or emotional conditioning that arises then we have perspective on it. We can see it in terms of what it is, the way it is. And so in the conventions that we have, the conventional world of Vinaya is then put in a context, isn't just clung to as an end in itself or a strong identity, or dismissed as not worth bothering with. I'm just practicing mindfulness, and Buddhadasa says that's all that's necessary, and so that's all I'm going to do. Is a kind of my ego, my personality, grasping some kind of interpretation and operating from that. So I find this way of using, of developing a kind of wonderful and interesting ability to within the context of this frail form, this mortal coil, this sensitive formation. And the way it's conditioned, the way it reacts and interprets things, and tends to grasp ideas or teachings. So explore this in your own experience. The commitment to thought, to the intellectual, discriminatory function, which is, it's a divisive function. It divides. Just language itself, its function is to discriminate and define and judge, to know right from wrong, good from bad. But then with awareness, then the intellectual function is no longer the attachment. We're putting that conditioning, that dualistic function, into perspective. It is the way it is. It is, the feelings of right, wrong, good, bad. They are what they are, and in the context of Dhamma, all conditions are impermanent and not self. Now, with Sati Sampajanya, one takes into account the conventional world that we live in. We're not ignoring it or dismissing it, but we're recognizing that living within the convention, say of monastic convention, is it's to be recognized that this is on the conventional realities of our lives. These are the limitations that we've chosen on behavior, and that limitation is a traditional form. The Vinaya, is usually held to be that discipline that the Buddha himself created. So it's that it comes from, it has a lineage in this tradition. So but it's recognized also that it is a convention. And how restriction on behavior and speech, how we hold that restriction. Do we meditate? Are we aware of it, or do we just merely grasp rules, restraints, views and opinions, and operate from that? Now, in my own experience, my tendency, the habit tendencies of my life were to, any kind of moral values, principles, ideals. This was because these were so strongly conditioned into me from childhood, of right and wrong, good and bad. what's moral and immoral and so forth. That these were very much, inculcated through the family and the culture of my life, so that one did tend to operate from this kind of conditioning process. So even how I held the Vinaya in a Thai monastery could get very puritanical, because the kind of values of my background were quite, black and white. So they were like, it had to be like this or it was wrong. You had to do this or you were wrong, or you had to, there's all these compulsions, these imperatives that made you right or wrong, or a good monk or a bad monk. Now just operating from that alone, one desperately held to trying to become a good monk and be kind of accepted and praised for being strict and pure in the Vinaya, and there's a kind of pride that develops in the sense of, and a kind of sense of being better than monks that aren't very strict. I can remember going through stages of looking down on monks who I thought were not very good. In Thailand, you've got what they call the Wat Ban monks and the Wat Ba monks, which mean the kind of village or town monks, and then the forest monks. And the forest tradition usually much more emphasizes the Vinaya in the training in Vinaya, much more strict. And oftentimes the Wat Ban, or the town monks, are, they'll have money and things like this, and these were anathema for a forest monk. Holding money was just, you were just a bad monk if you did that. Or, the funny one was drinking Ovaltine in the evening. This was totally condemned in the Wat Pa Pong tradition. So if you wanted to really vilify some monk, then he drinks Ovaltine in the evening, and then, he's one of those, huh? So my upachaya was a Wat Ban monk. He was also a meditator, but when I go visit him in Nong Khai, then he'd offer me Ovaltine in the evening, and I kind of, no, I don't drink Ovaltine in the evening. And then he told me that the Mahanikai Mahateras decided that Ovaltine was allowable in the evening. So it wasn't just breaking a rule, but it was kind of an agreed by the Sangha that this was be an allowable substance to use in the afternoon and evening. And I never thought of it like that. I thought they were just breaking the rules. And so I used to be critical of my upachaya. He's just breaking the rules, because I saw the rule as that was wrong and you shouldn't do it. It's interesting that just how, the way I did hold it, because it was considered wrong in the tradition that I trained in. But how that very sense of some monk who drinks Ovaltine in the evening as being a bad monk, I mean the way the mind works, it will take one little thing and then label that monk accordingly. Like even if he's good in everything else. Just because he drinks Ovaltine in the evening means he's a bad monk. The way that the mind can just operate from a bias or a prejudice or a position. So the emphasis on sati sampajanya, I could put this into perspective. The way I held right and wrong, good monk, bad monk, what ban monk, what ba monk, and so forth. The kind of sense of my own, that somehow I'm a step above those that because I don't carry money, then I'm somehow better than the ones that do. And the kind of arrogance that can come from that kind of grasping. Contemplating that sense of me being a better monk than somebody else, by putting that perception into consciousness, by really making it where, like really deliberately thinking, I'm a better Wat Pa monks. We're strict and we're pure and Vinaya, those Wat Ban monks are not. They're shameless monks. Just by deliberately thinking that, so that I'm conscious of thinking in this way, and then reflecting on the result of thinking this. Is this a peaceful state? Is this liberation? To hold to this view that I'm somehow better or purer than somebody else. And just by reflecting just by deliberately grasping this perception in a very deliberate, intentional way, but observing it, I realized that is not a peaceful mental state. That is not a liberating way to operate. To think that I'm better than somebody else. If you really when I really look at that, it's not a peaceful state to cultivate. It makes me arrogant and look down on somebody else. And that's not peaceful. It's not liberating to be better, to hold to the view that I'm purer or better than anyone else. And there's a way of exploring that, even our own arrogance or assumptions about, and the way we can look down on others, or within our own tradition, feel critical, or that our way is better than the other traditions. Just like around the Mahayana, Hinayana perceptions in Buddhism. There's, Mahayana have their particular hang-ups about being the kind of greater vehicle, and Theravada have their kind of view that we're the original, the pure teaching of the Buddha, uncorrupted by time, the original teaching, and so these views can be grasped, that somehow the original teaching is what we can trust, and we practice according to what the Buddha really taught, and not any of that other stuff that was added later, like we assume they did in Mahayana. Now, just that kind of mental proliferation, is that a peaceful mental state? To look down and feel somehow we're somehow better than say Mahayana. Is that what I want to live my life with? That assumption, operating from that position of identity and grasping of Theravada. And when I really look at it in terms of experience, a feeling of, of the kind of taking on the prejudices that one develops through this tradition against the others. That's not peaceful, that's not liberating, to be caught in that delusion. Now, you have to test this out for yourself. What is liberation then? What is the way of liberation? And this is an intuition. It's a direct knowing. It's not a position that one takes through the conventions that we're using. Even binding ourselves to the conventions in this way will not be liberating. It'll just make us into strict Vinaya monks of the Theravada forest tradition, and then the result of that grasping of that convention puts our relationships with others is then seen from that perspective. What we invest in, become and identify with, is usually, a bias of some sort, which is divisive, divides us from the rest. So, awakening to that, the suffering that's caused through that division, the dukkha, that's the first noble truth. Now, in the emptiness of the ground zero, or this point that includes everything, then it gives me, I find this is liberating because it doesn't take sides; it includes, so it isn't letting the convention take me over, but being able to use the conventions mindfully for awareness. The convention that I've chosen then is put in that perspective. It's not kind of, I'm a Theravada monk because Theravada is better than Mahayana or something like that. That's not, if that's what I believe, then through investigation I can see through that assumption that what I'm doing is somehow better than what somebody else is doing. Or the party line, isn't it, of any group of people, the biases, the party line of the Theravada Thai forest tradition, or the party line of any Mahayana tradition. So the point of liberation is in this awareness. You don't get liberated by grasping a convention. Grasping a convention, no matter how good it is, or sacred, or noble, or right it might be, the problem is always the ignorance, the avijja, and the grasping of conventions through avijja. Ignorance of Dhamma. Now in Theravada, sometimes you get, like some people are in our community here attracted to Kuan Yin and images like that, and then the Orthodox Theravadans say, oh, that's not really Buddhism, and that is not our tradition. That's Mahayana, and then it's kind of like a condemnation of it. If it's not included in the limits of our tradition, then we shouldn't have anything to do with it, is the kind of logic that comes from that way of thinking, that way of grasping. So by reflecting on this, like images, what are they? You have, how do they affect consciousness? How does this Buddha image here affect experience right now? Now, from the very sense of, the authority of the Buddha and the kind of patriarchal position of him being, very big and golden and sitting up on a high pedestal as a human form. And then I found on a personal level, I used to feel intimidated by it. And the sense of, the Buddha kind of looking at me in a critical way. Are you really pure enough? Have you been practicing hard enough? Because this is a kind of way that I always viewed authority or teachers. Even Ajahn Chah, I always, I could feel this intimidation of, can he see through me? Does he, can he know that I'm not really as good as I try to appear, and all that, and the sense of myself on a personal level is a critical one, where I never, on the level of my personality, judging myself, it tends to be always very critical in kind of, pointing out that you're not good enough. And that's the habit pattern of that I've developed through the cultural conditioning, social conditioning. So then I noticed this, that how I could look at this image here, this Buddha Rupa here, as a kind of one who's looking at me and seeing through me and criticizing me and kind of judging me in a way. Or then I changed it to seeing this image is always blessing me. And they got right hand up like this, a peaceful gesture. Just changing the way I looked at it. From seeing it as a kind of authoritarian, righteous figure who's judging me or criticizing me in some way, or seeing it in terms of a blessing. The Buddha's always blessing me rather than criticizing me. Now that's just by changing the attitude. Because then in terms of insight into Dhamma, the Buddha isn't a critic. He's not criticizing me, but this is always a blessing. This awareness, this Buddho is incorporating all that. It's not concerned with my purity and my mood of the moment, or my thoughts, or the way I am as a person. Is this kind of continuous, ongoing blessedness, blessing, receiving, opening to this formation. And that's the way, from that perspective, then, just by reflecting in that way, then this Buddho, or this awareness, is what I trust in. Because the image itself is merely an icon, a kind of symbol for that. That Buddha image there is merely a symbol for this Buddho, this awareness, sati sampajanya, satipanya. So when I contemplate the image itself, it's always like this, the word silence or Buddho. It brings me into this awareness. The real Buddho, the real Buddha is this, which is a blessing. It's not a kind of judge and a critic. symbols like Kuan Yin, these are individual. How these affect and their value can't be kind of defined by somebody else. How do they affect consciousness? Do they help you toward awareness? Or do you just attach to some kind of concept of some kind of female deity that in the universe and that you devote yourself to? Or is it using the image of Kuan Yin helpful towards awareness? So Kuan Yin always has this quality, like being more female in its form of not being so critical or judgmental. Like patriarchal authority tends to always convey to us this kind of this judgment. You have misbehaved and you're going to be punished. I'm going to punish you for misbehaving. And that's how, at least I tend to see the male patriarchal authority is a very kind of judgmental force. And then the more kind of non-judgmental force in, say, Kuan Yin is more like the female or the mother that loves her children no matter how naughty or horrible they are. It's a mother, in the stereotype, usually loves her children, no matter what they do or how horrible they might look or deformed or whatever. It's like this unquestioning love. It tends to be more associated in people's minds with the female form. So, in this way, bringing into consciousness what we're actually doing, how these various icons affect our conscious experience of the moment. Now, if you've got this bias that Kuan Yin somehow is not allowed because it's not Theravada, then if that's my mindset, and so as soon as I see a figure of Kuan Yin, I think, that's not Theravada, shouldn't be here. Immediate reaction, isn't it? It's not allowed because it's not Theravada. That is because of the viewpoint that's Mahayana, and Mahayana is not allowed. So that's a sign of the grasping of the convention. Then those that aren't totally committed and limited to Theravada might grasp that, really I'm Mahayana at heart. Even though I'm a Theravada monk or nun, I'm really at heart a Mahayana, because it's the greater vehicle and it has these beautiful images and techniques and bodhisattva practices and so forth, and so then we tend to kind of put up with the hardline Theravadins, but in our own practice we're identified with Mahayana. Well, these are I'm just pointing to extreme possibilities for grasping, because this awareness is neither Theravada or Hinayana or Mahayana. And these are projections from the human mind, aren't they? These are concepts, ideas, conventions. So we can project, Kuan Yin, that's Mahayana, and so, and as that's a conventional, from being, restricted to the Theravada convention, as seen not allowed. But what I'm more interested in is breaking through this dualism, not committing myself to it. I'm willing to live within the restriction and the restraint and the limits of Theravada, on in the level of Vinaya. But then I have to trust my own intuition in terms of experience, how things affect me. I'm interested in how images, what I see, hear, smell, taste, touch, affect consciousness. It's like going outside Buddhist tradition, like the figure of Ganesha, for example. Now, when I first saw a Ganesha image, I thought, what a ridiculous thing, a human body with an elephant's head and a pot belly, elephant's head, and people worship this. It's ridiculous. Because from my cultural positioning, this is, God or Buddha. I mean, these are more sublime forms, and then where there's something totally absurd about worshiping a figure a human figure that has an elephant's head. And so, and this was the cultural conditioning operating, because it has become a ridiculous figure, actually. But then, when I stopped just looking at it through seeing it in terms of being a ridiculous figure, just contemplating the effects of Ganesha on consciousness, it's kind of lovable figure, I find. And in Hindu, in India and places like that, of course, it's a kind of deity that kind of ordinary people can relate to. It's a kind of, the more male authorian figures like Shiva or Vishnu, or these are kind of remote and distant, kind of harsher forms. And when you bring it down to just a kind of cuddly and sweet little Ganesha, this sometimes might be easier to relate to in your daily life. I'm just speculating, but how people's spiritual development gravitates towards what is useful, what helps them to be more confident or less frightened, or gives them sense of relationship with the divine that maybe more austere icons and figures will not allow. Not that I go around worshipping Ganesha, but I'm more interested in the effect it has. First, of course, the cultural reaction was, what a ridiculous thing. How can anybody worship anything so absurd? Two, not grasping that position anymore, but reflecting and contemplating this, how forms affect consciousness, how the female form of Kuan Yin, or the more masculine form of the Buddha, now the point of it all is to bring us into the present, not to convert us into some kind of Kuan Yin cult or Ganesha cult or pure Theravadan cult, but to be able to learn from everything that does impinge on us. How form religious iconography affects us in this present moment. In my own case, I know I'm not particularly, I don't have any great connection to Kuan Yin as a icon that I gravitate toward, but because the Buddha Rupa is what I've used, what I've developed. So I do really like Buddha Rupas. And then just seeing through the tendency to interpret a Buddha Rupa as a male authority figure that's passing judgment on me as a person, towards this reflection on Buddho, on the Buddha as a refuge, as this all-accepting, encompassing, compassionate, blessing. And this is how I experience then this awareness that's developed in the stillness, the still point of awareness, the Buddho, the silent mind. It's like blessing me all the time. It's not criticizing. It's discerning in those things as they are, but it's not telling me how I should or shouldn't be. And I think this is I found this very helpful change, a shift from seeing it in this very, judgmental way towards this compassionate way, this way of blessing, that I'm in this state of being blessed every moment. It's not just when I sit in front of the Buddha Rupa. Because this Buddho then is with me all the time. It's wherever, I am, whatever happening externally, internally. Because it is blessing, it's liberating to be aware. It is suffering to not be aware and be caught up in the divisions that one creates out of ignorance. This sense of imperfection, of loneliness, of separation, of something's wrong, something's incomplete, something's not right. Feeling the way that if we grasp the intellectual positions and the ideas and emotional habits, and we all are judging them too. Our judgmental faculties are, criticizing. This is, you shouldn't think this thought. You shouldn't feel like this. You shouldn't have done that. You shouldn't have said that. And this critical faculty is a real tyrant when we don't understand it. When we operate and grasp the critical functions, then wherever we are, there's always, this feeling something's wrong, something's incomplete, something's not quite right. There's always a threat. There's some from outside. There's always possibility for failure. Something can go wrong. Everything could fall apart, lose control. Because in that realm of dualism, because that's how that is, the realm of dualism is changing, uncertain, and it can't be, it isn't blessing us. The conditioned realm is not blessing us. And so when we attach to it, then we are limited and caught into that sense of division and separation. And that is the dukkha of the First Noble Truth. also like in Thailand, for example, monks that wear mala beads usually are considered not very good monks by the forest tradition. So you have, and oftentimes, you find all kinds of kind of crazy monks, like especially Tudanga monks that just kind of wander around Thailand and that tell fortunes and do all kinds of things, to make a living, and they have all these superstitions and things that are very that can be criticized. They're not part. They're not teaching awareness, but encouraging grasping of superstitions. So I gather from how I saw it in Thailand that mala beads were always associated with that kind of monk. You see. So one time, I remember having some mala beads, and the Thai forest monk was, said, "Oh, you use mala beads, eh?" I said, "That's not, And I kind of felt like I shouldn't be using them. But how do how do I use those? Is it am I just promoting a superstition? But not the way I use them. It's for awareness. So it's not a I don't see it as any obstruction, but a skillful means that of using, say, one's hands, moving the bead with awareness. It's just as simple as that. But then you've got the prejudices of your own tradition to deal with. And all traditions have their, because they are limited and they have their biases and preferences and so forth. It's just a part of that realm of conventionality. That's the way the conventional world is. But then the goal, the aim of the Buddha is not the convention, but the Paramattha Satya, the freedom from attachment to the sankharas. So see this, encourage you to develop this sense of, trust in the awareness, not in any position on the conventional level, but to use the conventions for bringing into consciousness the fears, the desires, the biases, the hang-ups that we have on the personal level. So in Buddhism is like a teaching that actually, in the end, one isn't becoming a Buddhist. The Buddha referred to it always as a raft, a kind of expedient means. A raft, to get to the other shore a raft isn't a kind of nuclear-powered submarine. You don't have to build any super vehicle. When you build a raft, you usually gather the flotsam and jetsam, the stuff that's around the beach, the bits and pieces of vines and wood and plastic and that you find in order to create some kind of raft that gets you across the stream, gets you across the river. But then he said it's not, when you get to the other side, you don't have to carry the raft around with you. It's merely an expedient means. So see, the conventions, they are what they are. They're the expedient means. They're not an end in themselves. They're not binding ourselves to a raft, but to using the raft for getting across to the other side, which is the awareness, crossing from the conventional, habitual obsessions towards the other shore, which is the awareness, the liberation through sati sampajanya, satipanya.